The glass walls of James Harper's corner office framed a gray city skyline, the kind that made you feel small even when you were on the top floor. At 42, James stood at the helm of Harper's Market, a grocery chain he built from a single store in a dusty strip mall to 12 thriving locations across the state. The view from his office was a trophy of that success, a testament to years of grit, late nights, and a promise he'd made to himself long ago. But today, as he stared at the latest reports spread across his desk, the promise felt like a ghost. Sales were slipping. Customer complaints were climbing. Words like rude staff and long waits peppered the feedback forms. But one phrase kept surfacing, sharp as a blade: mistreatment of elderly customers. James's jaw tightened. He thought of his grandmother, Clara, her hands trembling, as she counted coins at a checkout counter years ago, ignored by a cashier who'd rolled her eyes. That memory had fueled him to start Harper's Market, to create a place where every customer, especially the elderly, felt valued. Now, his own company was failing that vision. The reports were sterile, just numbers and vague summaries from district managers. They didn't tell him why lines were long, why employees were rude, or why customers like his grandmother were leaving humiliated. James needed the truth, and he wasn't going to find it in a spreadsheet. He leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking under his weight, and made a decision that would have sounded insane to anyone else in the C-suite. He was going undercover. Harper's Market wasn't just a business. It was personal. The grocery industry was a battlefield now, with mega chains and online retailers squeezing smaller players like his. If he didn't fix this, the company could bleed customers until it collapsed. But more than that, James couldn't stomach the idea of his stores becoming the kind of place his grandmother had endured, a place where people were transactions, not people. He built this company on respect, and he'd be damned if he let it crumble. To pull this off, he needed a plan. At 12 stores, Harper's Market was small enough that some employees might recognize him from company newsletters or annual meetings. He couldn't just walk in as a random hire without raising suspicion. So, he called Rachel Najun, his executive assistant and one of the few people he trusted implicitly. Rachel was sharp, discreet, and didn't mince words, a rare combination. In a world of corporate yes men, undercover? Rachel raised an eyebrow when James explained his idea over coffee in a quiet corner of the office. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," James said, stirring his black coffee. "I need to see what's happening in the stores, Rachel. Not what the district managers think I want to hear." She leaned back, crossing her arms. "You're not exactly invisible, James. People know your face. And you're terrible at blending in your suits, probably cost more than my rent." He chuckled, but his eyes were steady. "That's why I need your help. Create a cover story. Make me a new hire, someone low-key. I'll do the rest." Rachel sighed, already pulling out her tablet. "Fine, but if you get caught, don't blame me when the rumor mill starts churning." They crafted a persona. Mark Evans, a 30-something. Transfer from a fictional distribution center, hired as a cashier for a store optimization program. Rachel would handle the paperwork, slipping Mark's name into the payroll system without raising flags. To sell the disguise, James traded his tailored suits for a plain navy polo and khakis from a thrift store. He shaved his neatly trimmed beard into uneven stubble, swapped his contacts for thick-rimmed glasses, and practiced slouching to shed the CEO posture he'd honed over years. In the mirror, he barely recognized himself, not just because of the clothes, but because of the nervous energy in his chest. For the first time in years, he felt like the kid who'd opened his first store, unsure but determined. James chose the Springwood store, a mid-sized location in a suburban neighborhood 20 miles from headquarters. It was the chain's worst. The former, with complaints piling up like unpaid bills. Customers reported long lines, surly employees, and, worst of all, managers mocking elderly shoppers. The store manager, Tom Carver, had been with the company for a decade, but recent feedback suggested his leadership was a problem. Was he the issue, or was it something deeper? James needed to know. On his first morning, James drove to Springwood in a beat-up sedan he'd borrowed from a friend, leaving his BMW in the garage. The store's parking lot was half empty, a bad sign for a Monday morning. The exterior looked tired, faded signage, a flickering neon light above the entrance. Inside, the air smelled of overripe produce and cleaning solution. James adjusted his name tag, which read Marquee, and stepped into the chaos. The store was a mess. Shelves were half-stocked, a register was down, and a line of customers snaked toward the back. Employees moved with the sluggishness of people who'd given up, or the frantic pace of those stretched too thin. James's heart sank, but he kept his face neutral. He was here to observe, not to judge, not yet. A woman approached him, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "You must be Mark," she said, extending a hand. "I'm Sarah Bennett, assistant manager. Welcome to the madhouse." James shook her hand, noting the calluses on her palm. "Thanks. Looks busy." Sarah gave a tired smile. "Busy's one word for it. Come on, I'll show you the ropes." As she led him to the registers, she lowered her voice. "A heads up. Tom, the manager, can be intense. Just keep your head down and you'll be fine." James nodded, his stomach tightening. Sarah's warning wasn't just a courtesy, it was a red flag. She moved with the efficiency of someone juggling too many tasks, pausing to help a cashier fix a jammed scanner while answering a customer's question about canned goods. She was holding the store together, the barely dot at the register. James started training, scanning items under Sarah's guidance. The system was clunky, the scanner lagging with every beep. Customers were a mix of impatient and polite, but James noticed their frustration, long waits, missing price tags, and a general sense of neglect. He kept his eyes open, watching the employees. Most avoided looking at the manager's office, a glass-walled box near the front. When Tom Carver stepped out, the air shifted. Tom was a stocky man in his late 40s, with a permanent scowl and a voice that carried like a foghorn. He strode toward the registers, his boots thumping on the linoleum. "Sarah," he barked. "Why is this line moving like molasses?" Sarah flinched but kept her tone even. "We're down a register, Tom. I'm working on it." "Work faster," he snapped, then turned his attention to James. "New guy, huh? Don't screw this up. We don't have time for rookies who can't keep up." James nodded, biting back a retort. "Yes, sir." Tom lingered, watching James scan a customer's groceries. Then an elderly woman approached, her cart holding a small assortment of items: bread, milk, a few cans of soup. She moved slowly, her hands trembling as she placed each item on the conveyor belt. James recognized her immediately. Helen Murray, a regular he'd seen mentioned in complaint logs for being too slow. Her white hair was neatly pinned, and her eyes carried a quiet dignity. Tom sighed loudly, crossing his arms. "Here we go again," he muttered, just loud enough for James and Helen to hear. "These old folks always take forever." James's blood ran hot. Helen's shoulders stiffened, her hands fumbling with a coupon. "I'm sorry," she said, softly, her voice barely audible. "I didn't mean to hold anyone up." Tom rolled his eyes, his voice dripping with fake patience. "No problem, ma'am. Take your time." Then, under his breath, he added, "Not like we've got a business to run." James clenched his jaw, his fingers tightening on the scanner. Helen's cheeks flushed with embarrassment as she hurried to pack her bags. James stepped in, gently placing her items in her cart. "No rush at all, ma'am," he said, his voice warm. "I've got you." Helen gave him a grateful smile, her eyes glistening. "Thank you, young man." As she shuffled away, Tom shook his head. "You'll learn, kid," he said to James. "These seniors are a pain. Slow as hell and barely spend enough to justify the space they take up." James forced a neutral expression, but his mind was racing. This was worse than he'd feared. Tom wasn't just a bad manager. He was poison, infecting the store with contempt. Sarah, standing nearby, shot James an apologetic look but said nothing. Her silence spoke volumes. She was afraid, and so was everyone else. That night, as James drove home, Helen's humiliated expression haunted him. So did Sarah's exhaustion, the employees' fear, and Tom's casual cruelty. He'd built Harper's Market to be a place of respect, a haven for people like his grandmother. Now, one of his own managers was tearing that apart. Tomorrow, he'd go back, not just to observe, but to start gathering the evidence he'd need to act. This wasn't just about one store anymore. It was about saving the soul of his company. James Harper woke before dawn, the weight of yesterday's discoveries pressing on his chest. As Mark Evans, the unassuming cashier, he'd seen enough in one day at the Springwood store to know something was deeply wrong. Tom Carver's disdain for customers like Helen Murray, Sarah Bennett's quiet exhaustion, the nervous glances of employees. It wasn't just bad management. It was a betrayal of everything Harper's Market stood for. Today, he'd dig deeper. He needed evidence, patterns, something concrete to justify the action he was itching to take. Pulling on his thrift store khakis and adjusting his fake glasses, James steeled himself. This wasn't just about saving one store. It was about saving his company's soul. The Springwood store looked no better in the morning light. The parking lot was still sparse. The neon signs still flickered, and the air inside carried the same stale mix of overripe fruit and desperation. James clocked in, his name tag reading Marquee, and took his place at Register 3. The scanner stuttered. With every item, a relic of outdated tech that hadn't been updated in years. Customers grumbled, but James kept his focus split. One eye on the groceries, the other on the store's pulse. Sarah Bennett was already there, juggling tasks like a circus performer with too many plates. She fixed a jammed conveyor belt, answered a call about a delivery delay, and reassured a customer about a missing coupon, all before 9 a.m. Her dark hair was tied back tighter today, but the shadows under her eyes were deeper. James watched her pause to rub her temples, a fleeting moment of vulnerability before she straightened up and moved on. She was the glue holding this place together, but the cracks were starting to show. "Morning, Mark," Sarah said, passing by with a clipboard. "You settling in okay?" "Yeah, getting the hang of it," James lied, forcing a smile. "You look like you're running a marathon already." She let out a dry laugh. "Feels like it. If you need anything, just holler. And steer clear of Tom if you can." James nodded, but Tom Carver was exactly who he wanted to watch. The store manager hadn't appeared yet, but his presence loomed like a storm cloud. Employees flinched when his office door creaked open, their movements quickening as if to prove they weren't slacking. James scanned a customer's canned soup, noting the tension in the air. It wasn't laziness he saw, it was fear. His first real clue came mid-morning, when a young stock clerk named Jake Torres approached the registers. Jake was in his early 20s, wiry, with a quick smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He carried a crate of apples, stacking them near the produce section with a precision that bordered on art. James noticed Jake pause, rearranging a display. To make the apples more eye-catching, grouping them by color in a way that felt fresh, inviting. It was the kind of initiative James had always encouraged in his stores, until Tom appeared. "What the hell is this?" Tom's voice cut through the hum of the store. He stomped over, his boots thudding. "Who told you to mess with the display, Torres?" Jake froze, his hands hovering over the apples. "I just thought it'd look better this way, sir." "Customers." "Might. Customers don't care about your artsy crap." Tom snapped. "Put it back the way it was. You're not paid to think. You're paid to stack." Jake's face flushed, but he nodded, dismantling his work in silence. James's stomach twisted. Jake wasn't just a stock clerk. He had ideas, potential, the kind of spark that could make a store stand out. But Tom was crushing it. As Jake retreated, James caught his eye and gave a small nod, hoping to signal some kind of encouragement. Jake didn't return it. The morning dragged on, and James started piecing together the store's dysfunction. The registers were a nightmare. 2 of the 6 were down, forcing customers into long lines. Sarah spent half her time troubleshooting, her frustration evident as she muttered about budget cuts and no replacements. The schedules, taped to the breakroom wall, were another red flag. James glanced at them during a quick break. Sarah worked double shifts almost daily, while older employees like Margaret, a cashier in her 60s, had erratic hours that seemed designed to exhaust her. Jake and a few others were stuck with short, unpredictable shifts, barely enough to make a living. Meanwhile, a handful of employees, Tom's favorites, who laughed at his crude jokes, had consistent, full-time schedules. It wasn't just unfair. It was deliberate. James's observations were interrupted by a familiar figure at his register, Helen Murray, the elderly customer from yesterday. Her card held the same modest haul: bread, milk, a few cans, but her hands moved more cautiously, as if she expected another jab. James greeted her warmly. "Good to see you again, ma'am." "No rush. I'll get these bagged for you." Helen's eyes softened. "You're kind, young man. Not everyone here is." As James scanned her items, he leaned in slightly. "You come here a lot, don't you? How's the store been treating you?" She hesitated, glancing toward Tom's office. "It used to be better. Years ago, this place felt like home. The staff knew my name, helped me with my bags. Now," she trailed off, her voice small, "it's not the same." James's heart sank. "I'm sorry to hear that. We'll do better, I promise." Alan gave a faint smile, but it was tinged with doubt. As she shuffled away, James noticed Tom watching from across the store, his arms crossed, his scowl deepening. When Helen was out of earshot, Tom sauntered over. What was that new guy? Chatting up the slowpokes? "Just helping a customer," James said evenly, keeping his eyes on the register. Tom snorted. "Waste of time. These old folks come in, count their pennies, ask dumb questions, and hold up the line. I keep telling corporate we should push them to shop online, but do they listen? No." James's fingers tightened on the scanner. He wanted to fire Tom right then, but he needed more proof that this wasn't just one bad day, but a pattern. He forced a nod. "Got it." The rest of the shift confirmed his suspicions. Tom's management wasn't just abrasive. It was toxic. He barked orders without explanation, ignored Sarah's requests for support, and openly mocked employees who didn't meet his arbitrary standards. At one point, James saw Margaret, the older cashier, struggle with a heavy bag of dog food. Sarah rushed to help, but Tom, standing nearby, just laughed. "Careful, Margaret. Don't break a hip." Sarah shot Tom a look but said nothing, her lips pressed into a thin line. James caught her eye, and for a moment, he saw not just exhaustion but resignation. She was fighting a losing battle, and she knew it. During a rare lull, James slipped into the break room, pretending to check his phone. Sarah was there, sipping coffee that had gone cold, her eyes fixed on the table. "Long day?" James asked, keeping his tone light. She sighed, glancing at him. "Long year, Mark. I've got a 5-year-old at home, and these shifts are killing me. But if I complain—" She didn't finish, but the fear in her voice was clear. "You've been here a while, haven't you?" James pressed gently. "What's it like working for Tom?" Sarah hesitated, then lowered her voice. "He's been here forever, so corporate trusts him. But he plays favorites, cuts hours if you cross him, and doesn't care about the customers. I try to keep things running, but it's like bailing out a sinking ship with a teaspoon." James nodded, his mind racing. Sarah wasn't just overworked, she was trapped, balancing a child and a job that demanded everything and gave nothing back. He wanted to tell her who he was, to promise change, but he couldn't. Not yet. The break room door swung open, and Jake walked in, his shoulders slumped. He grabbed a soda from the fridge and sat across from Sarah. "Tom's on my case again," he muttered. "I suggested a new layout for the produce section, and he acted like I'd insulted his mother." Sarah gave a tired smile. "He doesn't like ideas, Jake. Just keep your head down." "That's the problem," Jake said, his voice low but sharp. "I've got ideas, ways to make this place better, bring in more customers. But Tom shuts me down every time. I'd quit, but I need this job." James's chest tightened. Jake's frustration mirrored his own, from years ago when he was a young entrepreneur fighting to be heard. He wanted to step in, to tell Jake his ideas mattered, but Mark Evans couldn't do that. Not yet. The rest of the day was a blur of ringing up customers, dodging Tom's barbs, and watching the store limp along. By closing time, James was exhausted, but his notebook hidden in his pocket was filled with details. Tom's insults, Sarah's double shifts, Jake's stifled creativity, Margaret's unfair schedule, and Helen's quiet dignity in the face of disrespect. The store wasn't just failing. It was breaking people down. As he locked up his register, James overheard two cashiers whispering near the break room. "Tom cut my hours again," one said, a woman named Tina, "all because I told a customer we were out of stock on something. Meanwhile, his buddies get 40 hours a week." "Yeah," the other cashier replied. "And did you hear what he said to Mrs. Murray today? Told her to hurry it up, like she's a nuisance. She's been coming here forever." James's grip on his keys tightened. He thought of his grandmother, her hands trembling at a checkout counter, ignored or mocked. He'd built Harper's Market to be different, to be better. But here, under Tom's watch, it was worse. Driving home, James's mind churned. Sarah's exhaustion, Jake's crushed potential, Helen's humiliation, they weren't just problems. They were symptoms of a deeper rot. Tom was the obvious culprit, but was he the only one? Was corporate turning a blind eye? Tomorrow, James would push harder, talk to more employees, maybe even Helen. He needed enough evidence to act, not just to fire Tom, but to fix the system that had let this happen. The stakes were higher than one store. This was about the promise he'd made to himself, to his grandmother, and to every customer who walked through those doors. James Harper's third day at the Springwood store began with a quiet resolve. As Mark Evans, the unassuming cashier, he'd spent 2 days witnessing the rot at the heart of Harper's Market. Tom Carver's toxic leadership, Sarah Bennett's exhaustion, Jake Torres's stifled potential, and the quiet humiliation of customers like Helen Murray. His notebook, tucked in his pocket, was filled with details: Tom's insults, unfair schedules, broken equipment, and a culture of fear that choked the store. Today, James wasn't just observing. He was ready to act. But he needed one final piece of evidence, something undeniable, to ensure Tom's removal wasn't just impulsive, but justified. Corporate protocol demanded it, and James wanted no loopholes for Tom to slip through. The store was as chaotic as ever. A delivery truck was late, leaving shelves half empty, and the remaining registers groaned under the weight of impatient customers. James worked register 3, scanning items while keeping an eye on the floor. Sarah darted between tasks, her face pale from another sleepless night juggling work and motherhood. Jake moved quickly, restocking shelves but avoiding Tom's office. Like it was a minefield. The air felt heavier today, as if the store itself sensed a storm brewing. James's opportunity came just before noon. He was ringing up a young mother's groceries when he heard Tom's voice boom across the store. "Bennett, get over here." Sarah, who was helping an elderly man find gluten-free bread, froze mid-sentence. She apologized to the customer and hurried toward Tom, who stood near the dairy aisle, arms crossed, his scowl deeper than usual. "What's this mess?" Tom gestured to a small spill of milk on the floor. "Barely a puddle. You're supposed to manage this place, not let it fall apart." Sarah's voice was tight but professional. "I was helping a customer, Tom. I'll get it cleaned up." "You're always helping someone," Tom sneered. "Maybe if you spent less time chatting and more time doing your job, we wouldn't look like a dump." James's fingers paused on the scanner. The customer in front of him, a middle-aged woman with a toddler in her cart, shifted uncomfortably. Sarah's cheeks flushed, but she grabbed a mop from a nearby closet and started cleaning, her movements quick and mechanical. Tom didn't move, just watched her with a smirk, as if her humiliation was a show. James's blood boiled, but he held back. He needed something bigger, something that would expose Tom's behavior to everyone, not just him. His chance came an hour later, when Helen Murray returned. She approached James's register with her usual modest haul: a loaf of whole wheat bread, a quart of milk, a few cans of soup. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed each item on the conveyor belt, her eyes darting nervously toward Tom's office. James greeted her warmly. "Good to see you, Mrs. Murray. Take your time." She smiled, but it was fragile. "You're a kind one, Mark. Not many left like you." Before James could respond, disaster struck. Helen reached for her purse, and a glass jar of applesauce slipped from her cart, shattering on the floor. The sound echoed, drawing every eye in the store. Helen gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she stammered. "I didn't mean—" Tom was on her in seconds, storming out of his office like a bull. "Are you kidding me?" he snapped, his voice loud enough to silence the hum of the store. "You're holding up my line again, and now you're breaking things? Hurry it up, lady, or shop somewhere else." Helen's face crumpled, her eyes glistening with shame. Customers in line shifted, some looking away, others whispering. Sarah, nearby, dropped her clipboard and started toward Helen, but Tom waved her off. "Don't bother, Bennett. She's wasting everyone's time." James's vision narrowed. This was it, the line Tom couldn't cross. He stepped out from behind the register, his heart pounding, but his voice steady. "That's enough, Tom." Tom spun toward him, eyes narrowing. "Excuse me, new guy? Get back to your register before I write you up." James didn't move. He reached for his glasses, pulling them off slowly, then unpinned his name tag and set it on the counter. The store seemed to hold its breath. "I'm not Mark Evans," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I'm James Harper, the owner of this company." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Sarah's mouth fell open, her mop frozen mid-swipe. Jake, restocking nearby, dropped a can of beans, his eyes wide. Customers murmured, craning their necks. Tom's face drained of color, his scowl replaced by a slack-jawed stare. "You what?" "ESTAMMERED. James stepped forward, his gaze locked on Tom. "I've been here 3 days, watching how you run this store. I've seen you mock customers like Mrs. Murray, overwork employees like Sarah, and crush ideas from people like Jake. You've turned this place into something I'm ashamed to call mine." Tom's mouth opened, then closed. He tried to recover, his voice rising. "With all due respect, Mr. Harper, you don't know what it's like running this place. These people," he gestured to Helen, "then the employees, they slow everything down. I'm just keeping things moving. By humiliating a customer who's been loyal for years," James's voice was steel. "By bullying your staff until they're too scared to speak? That's not management, Tom. That's failure." Helen, still clutching her purse, looked at James, her eyes wet but grateful. Sarah stepped closer, her expression a mix of shock and cautious hope. Jake watched from the sidelines, his fists clenched, as if waiting for the other shoe to drop. James continued, his voice steady but sharp. "I'm launching a formal investigation into your conduct, effective immediately. You're suspended without pay until it's complete. Gather your things and leave now." Tom's face reddened, his hands balling into fists. "You can't just do this. I've been here 10 years. You think you can run this place without? Emmy, good luck." James didn't flinch. "I'll take my chances. Go." Tom hesitated, his eyes darting to the employees, then the customers, who were now watching openly. Realizing he had no allies, he grabbed his jacket from the office, muttering curses under his breath, and stormed out. The glass door slammed behind him, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. James turned to the crowd, his heart still racing. Employees stared, some in disbelief, others with cautious relief. Customers whispered, a few nodding approvingly. Sarah stood frozen, her mop still in hand. James softened his tone. "I know this is a shock, but I'm here because I care about this company, about you, about our customers. Things are going to change, starting today." He approached Sarah, who looked like she might collapse under the weight of the moment. "Sarah, I need to speak with you in the office." She nodded, her eyes wide, and followed him. Inside Tom's office, now a temporary command center, James closed the door. The space smelled of stale coffee and Tom's aftershave, a reminder of the mess they were unraveling. Sarah sat, her hands trembling slightly. "You're really the CEO?" she asked. James nodded, pulling off his glasses completely. "I'm sorry for the deception. I had to see what was happening here for myself. And I saw you, Sarah, how you've kept this place running despite everything. That's why I'm asking you to step up as interim store manager." Sarah blinked, her breath catching. "Me? I'm just the assistant." "I don't know if I can." "You've been doing it already," James said, leaning forward. "You've managed the floor, handled customers, covered for Tom's failures. You just didn't have the title or the authority. Now you will." Her eyes searched his, fear mixing with determination. I have a daughter, Mr. Harper. This job's already stretched me thin. What if I mess this up?" James's voice softened. "You won't be alone. I'm bringing support, and I'll be checking in. You've earned this, Sarah. I trust you to rebuild what Tom broke." Sarah swallowed, then gave a small nod. "Okay, I'll try." James stood. "Good. Let's go talk to the team." Back on the floor, employees gathered in a loose circle, their expressions a mix of shock and uncertainty. Jake stood at the back, arms crossed, while Margaret, the older cashier, looked cautiously hopeful. James clapped his hands, drawing their attention. "Listen up. Tom's gone, and Sarah's taking over as interim manager. Things are going to change: fair schedules, proper breaks, and respect for every customer and employee. I know trust has been broken here, but I'm asking you to give Sarah and me a chance to fix it." A murmur ran through the group. Jake raised a hand, his voice hesitant. "Does this mean we can actually suggest ideas now, without getting shut down?" James met his gaze. "Yes, I want to hear from all of you. This store isn't just mine. It's ours." Margaret spoke up, her voice soft but firm. "What about customers like Mrs. Murray? Will they be treated right? James nodded. Always. That's a promise. As the employees dispersed, some whispering excitedly, others still skeptical, James felt the weight of his words. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Sarah would need support. The staff would need time to trust again, and he'd need to ensure corporate backed these changes. But for the first time in days, he saw a flicker of hope in the Springwood store. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The Springwood store felt different the morning after Tom Carver's suspension, but not in the way James Harper had hoped. The air was lighter without Tom's looming presence, but a new tension hung over the aisles, a mix of uncertainty, skepticism, and cautious hope. Employees whispered in the break room. Customers noticed the absence of the gruff manager, and Sarah Bennett, now interim store manager, stood at the front of the store, clipboard in hand, looking like she'd been thrown into the deep end of a pool she wasn't sure she could swim. James, still posing as Mark Evans for the staff who didn't know his true identity, watched from his register. He'd handed Sarah the reins, but he knew the real work was just beginning. Sarah's first day as manager was a trial by fire. The store was short-staffed. Tom's erratic scheduling had left gaps that hadn't been filled. 2 cashiers called in sick, likely testing the new leadership, and the delivery truck, delayed again, left the produce section looking like a ghost town. Sarah moved with purpose, directing Jake Torres to prioritize restocking essentials and asking Margaret, the veteran cashier, to cover an extra register. But her hands trembled slightly as she scribbled notes, and James caught her glancing at the clock, as if counting the hours until she could pick up her daughter from daycare. James wanted to step in, to tell her she was doing fine, but he held back. Sarah needed to find her footing, and he needed to trust her. Still, he couldn't ignore the cracks forming. During a morning rush, a customer complained loudly about the wait, his voice carrying across the store. "This place is a joke," he snapped, tossing a loaf of bread onto the conveyor belt. Sarah hurried over, her voice calm but strained. "I'm so sorry, sir. We're working on getting another register open." The man scoffed. "Yeah, right, same excuse every time." Sarah's smile faltered, but she powered through, directing Jake to open a new lane. James watched, his chest tight. Sarah was trying, but the store's dysfunction, years in the making under Tom, wouldn't vanish overnight. Worse, not all the employees were on board. In the break room, James overheard Tina, a cashier who'd been one of Tom's favorites, muttering to another worker, "Sarah's in over her head. Tom kept things running, at least. This place is gonna crash and burn." James bit his tongue. Tina's loyalty to Tom wasn't surprising. People clung to the familiar, even when it was toxic, but it was a problem. Sarah needed the team's trust, and trust was in short supply. He made a mental note to address it, but first, he needed to see what a well-run store looked like. If Springwood was the worst of Harper's market, he wanted to understand the best. That meant visiting the Oak Ridge store, managed by Megan Foster, whose location consistently topped customer satisfaction and employee morale. Before leaving Springwood, James pulled Sarah aside in the manager's office, now cleared of Tom's clutter. "How are you holding up?" he asked, dropping the Mark Evans facade for the moment. Sarah sighed, rubbing her temples. "Honestly, I'm terrified. Half the staff think I'm a placeholder, and the other half are waiting for me to fail. And my daughter, Lily, she's 5, and I barely saw her this week because of these shifts." James nodded, his own guilt surfacing. He'd put Sarah in this position, knowing the pressure she was under. "You're not alone, Sarah. I'm bringing in support. Have you heard of Megan Foster, the manager at Oak Ridge?" Sarah's eyes flickered with recognition. "Yeah, her store's supposed to be the gold standard. Everyone talks about it. I'm heading there today to see what makes it work," James said. If it's as good as I think, I want Megan to help you here. Not to take over, just to guide you. Sarah's shoulders relaxed slightly. That'd be a relief. But, Mr. Harper, what if I can't do this? What if the staff don't listen? You're already doing it, James said firmly. You've been running this place without the title. The staff will come around, they just need time. And I'll be back tomorrow to check in. Sarah gave a small nod, her expression a mix of doubt and determination. James left her to it, hoping he wasn't asking too much. The Oak Ridge store, 30 miles away, was a revelation. The parking lot was bustling, the signage crisp and welcoming. Inside, the aisles were well stocked, the floors gleamed, and the air smelled faintly of fresh bread from an in-store bakery. Employees moved with purpose, not fear, chatting with customers as they worked. James, back in his CEO attire-tailored suit, no glasses, felt a pang of pride. This was what Harper's Market was supposed to be. He approached the cashier, a young man named Ethan, who greeted an elderly customer with a warm smile. "Take your time, ma'am," Ethan said as the woman counted out change. "No rush at all." James's heart lifted. This was the kind of service he'd envisioned when he started the company, inspired by his grandmother's experiences. Megan Foster was on the floor, helping a stock clerk adjust a display of seasonal fruit. She was in her late 30s, with a confident stride and an easy laugh that put everyone at ease. When James introduced himself, her eyes widened briefly, but she recovered quickly, shaking his hand. "Mr. Harper, didn't expect you today. Hope we're not in trouble." James smiled. "Far from it. I'm here to see why your store works so well." Megan chuckled, gesturing to the bustling floor. "Well, I hope we don't disappoint. Want the grand tour?" As they walked, Megan explained her approach. "It's about trust," she said. "I trust my team to do their jobs, and they trust me to have their backs. If someone's struggling, we figure out why. Maybe they need training, or maybe life's just hard. And customers, we treat them like family, not transactions." James nodded, taking notes. "What about schedules, equipment, corporate support?" Megan didn't sugarcoat it. "Corporate could do better. Our registers are old, and the scheduling system's a nightmare. But I work around it, talk to my team, make sure shifts are fair. And if a customer has a problem, we fix it on the spot. No excuses." They paused near the produce section, where a young employee was showing a customer how to pick ripe avocados. "That's what I want for Springwood," James said. "It's a mess over there." Tom Carver, the manager, was suspended yesterday for mistreating staff and customers. Sarah Bennett, his assistant, is stepping up, but she's overwhelmed. Megan's expression darkened. "Carver, I've heard stories. Never worked with him, but he's the type who thinks fear is leadership. Sarah's got potential, though I met her at a regional training once. She just needs confidence." James leaned in. "Would you be willing to help her? Visit Springwood once a week. Share what makes this place work. Not to take over, just to mentor." Megan considered it, leaning against the display. "I don't want to step on her toes. She's got to own that store." "You won't," James assured her. "Sarah needs guidance, not a replacement. You be a resource, someone she can lean on." Megan nodded slowly. "All right, I'm in. But you've got to fix the bigger issues, Mr. Harper. If Springwood's that bad, other stores might be slipping too." James met her gaze. "I know. That's why I'm here." Back at Springwood the next day, James, still as Mark for most of the staff, saw both progress and problems. Sarah had posted a new schedule, balancing shifts more fairly, but Tina and another cashier, loyal to Tom, were openly resistant. "This is ridiculous," Tina muttered during a break, loud enough for James to hear. "Sarah's changing everything. And for what? We were fine under Tom." Jake, sitting nearby, rolled his eyes. Fine? You mean overworked and miserable? At least Sarah's trying, Tina scoffed. She won't last a month. James kept quiet, but the division worried him. Sarah needed allies, not detractors. He approached her later, finding her reorganizing the break room schedule. How's it going? He asked, keeping his tone casual. Sarah sighed. Some of the team are on board, like Jake and Margaret. But Tina and a few others, they think I'm just a temp. And customers are still complaining. The broken registers aren't helping. James nodded. You're doing better than you think. I've got Megan Foster coming tomorrow to help. She runs Oak Ridge, and her store is a model for what we want here. Sarah's eyes lit up, but her voice stayed cautious. That's great, but what if I can't live up to that? You will, James said, and I'm not leaving you to figure it out alone. That afternoon, Sarah called a staff meeting. Her first as manager. The employees gathered reluctantly, some whispering, others checking their phones. Sarah stood at the front, her voice steady despite her nerves. I know things have been rough, she began. Tom's gone, and I'm stepping in. I want this store to be a place we're proud of, for us and for customers like Mrs. Murray. But I need your help. Jake raised a hand. Can we try new ideas? Like, I've got a plan for the produce section. Make it more appealing, maybe draw in more shoppers. Sarah hesitated, then nodded. Let's see it. Anyone else with ideas, bring them to me. We're in this together. Margaret, the older cashier, spoke up. What about the registers? They've been broken for months. Sarah glanced at James, who gave a subtle nod. I'm working on it, she said. Corporate's been notified. The meeting ended with cautious optimism, but James knew the road ahead was rocky. Later, he saw Helen Murray at the checkout, her cart lighter than usual. Mrs. Murray, he said, bagging her items. We're making changes. I hope you'll keep coming back. Helen smiled, her eyes brighter than before. I can tell something's different, Mark, or whoever you are. She winked, and James realized she'd overheard his reveal yesterday. Keep looking out for us old folks. James grinned, always. As he locked up that night, James felt a mix of hope and urgency. Sarah was stepping up, but the store was still fragile. Divided staff, outdated systems, and customers wary of change. Megan's guidance would help. But the real test was whether Sarah could unify the team and whether James could fix the systemic issues that had let Tom thrive. He drove home, his mind already turning to the corporate changes he'd need to push in the days ahead. James Harper stepped into the conference room at Harper's Market headquarters, the weight of the past week heavy on his shoulders. The glass table reflected the city skyline, a stark contrast to the cluttered aisles of the Springwood store, where he'd spent days undercover as Mark Evans. He'd seen the damage firsthand. Tom Carver's toxic leadership, Sarah Bennett's struggle to keep the store afloat, and the quiet dignity of customers like Helen Murray, who deserved better. Now, standing in his tailored suit, no longer hiding behind glasses and a fake name tag, James faced his district managers. This wasn't just about fixing one store. It was about rebuilding the foundation of his company. The room buzzed with tension as the 6 district managers filed in, their expressions a mix of curiosity and unease. Daniel Brooks, a seasoned manager with a knack for numbers, sat at the far end, his arms crossed. Emily Carter, younger and more open to change, leaned forward, her notebook already open. The others, veterans of the grocery industry, exchanged glances, sensing this wasn't a routine meeting. James didn't sit. He stood at the head of the table, hands resting on its edge, his voice steady but firm. Let's get to the point, he began. I went undercover at Springwood this week, and what I saw was unacceptable. Customers were mocked, employees were overworked and intimidated, and the store was falling apart. We've lost sight of what this company stands for. Murmurs spread through the room. Daniel leaned forward, his brow furrowed. Springwood? That's Tom Carver's store, right? His numbers have always been solid. That's the problem, James said sharply, clicking a remote to project the slide on the screen behind him. It showed Springwood's sales figures decent. On paper, but next to it, a list of customer complaints. Long lines, rude staff, mistreatment of elderly shoppers. Numbers don't tell the whole story. They don't show a manager humiliating a customer for dropping a jar. They don't show employees like Sarah Bennett working double shifts while Tom sat in his office. They don't show a culture of fear driving away the people we're supposed to serve. Emily exhaled, her pen pausing. That's worse than I thought. We should have caught it. Yes, we should have, James said, his gaze sweeping the room. And that's on all of us, including me. I trusted reports and spreadsheets instead of seeing things for myself. That ends now. He clicked to the next slide, outlining new evaluation metrics. Employee satisfaction, customer feedback, and leadership quality weighted as heavily as sales. Effective immediately, we're changing how we measure success. Every store will conduct anonymous employee surveys quarterly. If there are repeated complaints about leadership, we investigate, no exceptions. And starting next month, I'll visit each district's stores unannounced, not as a CEO, but as a customer. I want to see how our stores really run. Daniel shifted, his voice cautious. Look, James, I get it. Springwood was a mess. But changing everything, surveys, visits, new metrics, it's going to cost money. We're already stretched thin competing with mega chains and online retailers. Can we afford this? James met his gaze, unflinching. Can we afford not to? We're losing customers because of stores like Springwood. If we don't fix this, we won't have a company to worry about. Emily nodded, scribbling notes. I'm in. But we'll need training for managers, something to teach them how to lead without intimidation. And what about equipment? Broken registers and outdated systems are killing morale. Exactly, James said, clicking to another slide. We're investing in new technology starting with Springwood. And I'm launching a leadership training program led by Megan Foster from Oak Ridge. Her store's a model for what we want: trust, respect, and service. She's already agreed to mentor Sarah Bennett, Springwood's new interim manager. Daniel rubbed his temples, unconvinced. Megan's great, but not every manager's like her. And replacing people like Tom isn't easy. Finding good managers who'll work for what we pay is tough. Then we pay better, James said, his voice firm. And we train better. We don't just hire bodies, we hire leaders. If we want stores that treat customers and employees right, it starts with us. The room fell silent. Emily broke it, her voice thoughtful. What happened at Springwood after you suspended Tom? Is Sarah handling it? James hesitated, picturing Sarah's trembling hands and determined nod. She's trying. It's not easy, some employees are resistant, and the store's still a mess. But she's got potential, and Megan's support will help. I'm heading back there after this to check in. Daniel leaned back, his skepticism softening. You're serious about this, aren't you? Dead serious, James said. I built this company on the idea that we serve people, customers, and employees. If we lose that, we don't deserve to succeed. As the meeting ended, managers filed out, some energized, others wary. Emily lingered, catching James at the door. This is the right move, she said quietly. But it's going to be a fight. Not every store's like Springwood, but not every manager's like Megan either. I know, James said. That's why I need you all to step up, hold your stores accountable, and I'll do the same. Back at Springwood that afternoon, James slipped into his Mark Evans disguise one last time. Though most employees now knew his identity after the confrontation with Tom, The store was still chaotic, shelves half-stocked, registers sluggish, but there were signs of progress. Sarah had rearranged the break room, posting a revised schedule that balanced shifts more fairly. Jake was experimenting with a new produce display, his earlier ideas finally given a chance. Margaret, the older cashier, moved with a bit more confidence, no longer glancing nervously toward the manager's office. But challenges remained. Tina, the cashier loyal to Tom, was openly defiant, ringing up customers with a scowl and muttering complaints about Sarah's changes. During a lull, James overheard her in the break room, talking to another cashier. Sarah's acting like she's the boss now, but she's just corporate's puppet. This place was fine before all this drama. Jake, grabbing a water bottle nearby, snorted. Fine? You mean miserable? Sarah's actually listening to us. Give her a chance. Tina rolled her eyes. Whatever. She burn out, and we'll be back to square one. James clenched his jaw, but stayed silent. Tina's attitude was a problem, but forcing her out would only deepen the divide. Sarah needed to win the team over, not alienate them. He found her later going over inventory reports in the manager's office. Her hair was frazzled, and a photo of her daughter, Lily, sat on the desk, a reminder of the stakes she carried. How's it going? James asked, dropping the mark persona. Sarah sighed, pushing the reports aside. Better, but not great. Jake's ideas are helping, and Margaret's been a rock. But Tina and a few others, they're dragging their feet. And customers are still grumpy about the wait times. I don't know if I'm cut out for this. James pulled up a chair. You are. I saw it when I was undercover. You kept this place running under Tom. The resistance you're getting? That's normal. Change scares people. But you've got Megan coming tomorrow, and I'm pushing for new equipment to fix the registers. Sarah's eyes flickered with hope, but her voice stayed cautious. Megan's really coming? That's a relief. But what about corporate? Are they on board with all this? They will be, James said, though Daniel's skepticism lingered in his mind. I just met with the district managers. We're rolling out new policies, surveys, training, unannounced visits. It's not just about Springwood. It's about making sure no store ends up like this again. Sarah nodded, her shoulders straightening slightly. Okay, I want to make this work. For Lily, for the team, for customers like Mrs. Murray. You will, James said, and I'm not going anywhere. I'll check in regularly, and Megan's got your back. The next morning, Megan Foster arrived at Springwood, her presence a jolt of energy. She walked the floor with Sarah, pointing out small fixes, adjusting shelf heights for accessibility, streamlining checkout processes. She didn't take over, just offered suggestions, letting Sarah lead. James watched from a distance, impressed by Megan's balance of confidence and humility. When Megan caught Tina slacking at the register, she didn't scold her but asked, Hey, Tina, got any ideas for speeding up these lines? You've been here a while. You must know what works. Tina blinked, caught off guard, but muttered something about opening more registers during rushes. Megan nodded, jotting it down. Good call. Let's try it. It was a small moment, but James saw its impact. Tina's scowl softened, if only slightly. By the end of the day, Sarah looked less overwhelmed, her notebook filled with Megan's tips. Customers noticed the changes too. Helen Murray, at Jake's register, smiled as he bagged her groceries with care. This place feels different, she said, like it's waking up. James overheard and felt a flicker of validation. Springwood was far from fixed, but it was moving. Back at headquarters, he drafted an email to the district managers, detailing the new policies and scheduling Megan's first training session. As he hit send, he knew this was just the beginning. The real test would be sustaining these changes, not just at Springwood but across every store. For the first time in years, he felt like the leader he'd meant to be, not just a CEO, but a steward of the promise he'd made to his grandmother, to every customer, and to every employee counting on him. 3 months had passed since James Harper stood in the Springwood store, unpinning his Mark Evans name tag and revealing himself as the CEO of Harper's Market. The memory of that day, Tom Carver's stunned exit, Sarah Bennett's trembling acceptance of the interim manager role, and the cautious hope in the eyes of employees like Jake Torres and customers like Helen Murray still burned bright. Now, as James stood outside the Springwood store on a crisp autumn morning, he saw something new, a parking lot buzzing with cars, a freshly painted sign glowing above the entrance, and a steady stream of customers moving through the doors. The store wasn't perfect, but it was alive again, and that felt like a victory. Inside, the changes were tangible. New registers hummed smoothly, replacing the clunky relics that had frustrated customers and staff alike. Shelves were fully stocked, thanks to Sarah's streamlined inventory system, and Jake's creative produce displays vibrant stacks of apples and oranges arranged like a farmer's market drew shoppers in. The air smelled of fresh bread from a small bakery section Sarah had pushed for, a nod to the community's love for local touches. Employees moved with purpose, not fear, their name tags gleaming under the fluorescent lights. James, dressed in a simple jacket to blend in, watched from the sidelines, his heart swelling with pride. Sarah stood near the front, directing a new cashier with quiet confidence. Her hair was still pulled back, but the shadows under her eyes had faded, replaced by a spark of determination. She'd grown into the manager's role, not just filling Tom's shoes, but reshaping them entirely. James caught her eye, and she waved him over. "Mr. Harper," she said, her smile genuine. "Didn't expect you today." "Keeping you on your toes," James replied, grinning. "How's it going?" Sarah glanced around, her voice steady. "Better than I thought possible. The new registers helped, and Jake's ideas are bringing in more customers. We're not there yet, but it feels like a different place." James nodded, noticing Helen Murray at a nearby register, chatting with Jake as he bagged her groceries. Helen's guard held her usual essentials, but she moved with ease, no longer glancing nervously toward the manager's office. "You've done good, Sarah," James said. "Better than good." Sarah's cheeks flushed, but she held his gaze. "I couldn't have done it without Megan and you believing in me. That changed everything." Megan Foster's weekly visits had been a game changer. Her practical advice, streamlining schedules, empowering employees, prioritizing customer care, had given Sarah the tools to lead. Even Tina, the cashier once loyal to Tom, had come around, grudgingly at first, but now ringing up customers with a smile after Sarah included her in team decisions. The store's turnaround wasn't just about new equipment or policies. It was about trust, something Sarah had built one small act at a time. James walked the floor, stopping to talk with employees. Jake, now a shift lead, showed him a new layout for the seasonal aisle, designed to highlight local products. "We're getting more foot traffic," Jake said, his earlier frustration replaced by enthusiasm. "Customers love the local stuff, makes us stand out against the big chains." Margaret, the veteran cashier, chimed in from her register. "And the customers are noticing. Mrs. Murray told me yesterday this place feels like it used to, back when it was a community hub." James's thoughts drifted to his grandmother, Clara, whose experiences had inspired Harper's Market. He'd promised her a store where everyone felt valued, and for the first time in years, he felt he was keeping that promise. But Springwood was just one piece of the puzzle. The real test was ensuring every store followed suit. Back at headquarters, James's corporate changes were taking root. The new evaluation metrics, employee satisfaction, customer feedback, and Leadership quality had been rolled out across all 12 stores. Anonymous surveys revealed issues at 2 other locations, prompting swift investigations. The leadership training program, led by Megan, was training managers to prioritize respect over fear. James's unannounced visits kept everyone accountable. But they also reminded him why he'd started this company: to serve people, not just profits. That evening, James locked up the Springwood store with Sarah, the parking lot quiet under the glow of streetlights. "You're not just managing this store," he told her. "You're showing me what's possible. I'm putting you and Jake on a team to help shape company-wide policies. We need your voices." Sarah's eyes widened. "Us? You're not just anything," James cut in. "You're a leader. So is Jake. This company's future depends on people like you." Sarah smiled, a weight lifting from her shoulders. "For Lily," she said softly, "and for everyone here." James extended his hand. "Deal?" She shook. Her grip firm. "Deal, boss." As James drove home, the Springwood sign fading in his rearview mirror, he reflected on the journey. He'd been too far removed, trusting numbers over people, letting managers like Tom erode his vision. Going undercover had been a risk, but it had shown him the truth. A company wasn't its profits or its stores, it was its people. Sarah's resilience, Jake's creativity, Helen's loyalty, Megan's wisdom. They were the heart of Harper's Market. This wasn't the end. It was a new beginning. There were still challenges: competing with mega chains, training new managers, keeping the momentum, but for the first time in years, James felt in control, not of power, but of purpose. The story of James Harper and the Springwood store is more than a tale of corporate reform. It's a celebration of human dignity. James's journey reminds us that leadership isn't about titles or profits. It's about listening, acting, and uplifting those around you. Sarah's transformation from an overworked assistant to a confident leader shows the power of trust and opportunity. Helen Murray's quiet resilience underscores the importance of respecting every individual, regardless of age or status. Jake's stifled creativity, unleashed under Sarah's leadership, highlights the value of empowering new voices. And Megan's mentorship proves that change starts with collaboration, not control. The lessons are clear. Businesses thrive when they prioritize people over numbers. Respect isn't just a policy, it's a culture, built through small acts of kindness and accountability. James's promise to his grandmother and to every customer and employee is a call to action for all of us: to lead with empathy, to stand up for what's right, and to never stop listening. If this story moved you, there's more where it came from. Subscribe to the Legacy Stories channel on YouTube, where we share tales of courage, transformation, and the human spirit. Join our community to discover more stories that inspire and challenge us to build a better world, one act of respect at a time. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because every story matters.